Now to our wonderful panelists. We have four. We have Christina Watkins, who is an anchor at WDSU TV. Before joining WDSU, Christina spent 3 years in Charlotte, North Carolina at Spectrum News, anchoring the weekend or newscast. We also have Chris Hagan, sports anchor and reporter at Fox 8 in New Orleans. He's from Slidell, and Chris graduated from LSU Manship School. We also have Rilwan Blogan, reporter at Fox 8 in New Orleans. Before moving to the Crescent City, Rilwan was the lead crime reporter in Greensboro, North Carolina for Spectrum News, where he collected crime data and worked closely with area law enforcement. He started his career in Lansing, Michigan. And we also have Sky Ray, news producer at WTOC 11 in Savannah, Georgia, a recent Loyola grad. And while at Loyola, Sky was an assignment assistant for WWL-TV in New Orleans. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. And we're going to start right into it. Let's start with covering Black Lives Matter protests. I know everyone's had different experiences, whether being out in the field, on the desk. So let's just talk about how reporters could be safe out there, what you guys experience covering these protests. And anyone is welcome to start.
I'll go ahead and start. Thank you for having all of us, by the way. This is definitely an important topic, and hopefully you all have some good takeaways and some good notes that can be applied because it is certainly necessary. Covering protests, here, since I've been in New Orleans, it's different for me now that I'm on the desk, but in every market I've worked in, this is my third stop, there's been an officer-involved shooting that led to protests. Missouri, it was Mike Brown when I worked there. Charlotte, we had our own, we had Keith Scott. Now here, in Charlotte, covering protests there, it's more of a, yes, you want to be there, you want to be on the forefront, you have to get those important stories, but if you don't feel safe, get out, period, point blank. That's the most important thing to me. But also when you're covering these things, it's so important to make sure that you're getting the right message across. It can be a huge group of people. It can be, you know, people marching on the interstate, marching wherever, but it's important for us to be there. And I think what's been interesting to me and things that I've told my coworkers lately is protests are peaceful. You don't need to say peaceful protest because it is peaceful. That is what a protest is. If things get out of hand, then simply say things have gotten out of hand. But our wording is so crucial and our wording matters to our viewers. And when you hear violent protests or peaceful protests, that's almost taking away the fact that the protest isn't already supposed to be peaceful anyway, if that makes any sense. So I guess for me, just when I'm covering these things now on the desk, I just really make sure that we get our wording correct because that message is so important to what our viewers receive because that's all they're getting is from us.
And I'm nodding so much. This is Roban here with Christina's mentioning there about wording. Being out in the field, I'm very conscious of the words I'm using to make sure it's not being bubbled up with any other preconceived notions I may have unbeknownst to myself. So I'm always just very sure to exactly explain what I'm seeing going on. And like Christina mentions, I just say it's a protest. I don't try to use the word peaceful because it seems redundant in my opinion. And since all of the protests I've covered, I've never felt fearful. Usually I'm out with the photographer. More so I'm worried about them because they're usually walking backwards or not really having time to really grasp what's around them. So during these protests, I'm usually not too far behind with an arm in front of them, making sure they know I'm here, I'm watching your back.
And even now here with our protest, if our managers will ask, do you feel like you may need a security guard because of what Rilwan mentioned? Our photographers are walking backwards or we're walking backwards, you know, so it's good to have that third person there, just kind of keeping an eye around. And most times things are okay. I also haven't been in a situation where I felt unsafe, but I know my coworkers have. And if that's the case, then you just stay back. You can still get the story out by not being right in the middle. You know, we've been hit with tear gas before when I was in Charlotte, and pepper sprayed before, and that's not fun. So it's just, whenever you're in it, if you feel like it's going to get out of hand, then just stay back. You can still tell the story.
I would say, from a producer point of view, we did not have big protests in Savannah like there have been in New Orleans. We only had one. Nothing happened. There were arrests hours later, but that's because people were literally doing things that were illegal outside the protest. So we didn't have anything big. So that left me having to pull stories from CBS News Path or from CNN. And also, when I write my stories, making sure I change my wording. A lot of reporters say peaceful, this and that, and make sure to just say protest, or just make it seem like, you know, they're doing this action to try to show support or make, what am I trying to say? Like, to try to show support and just make a statement. You know, you're not trying to make it seem like it's some crazy event that's going on. I'll also say, as a producer, if you have live shots, make sure you watch for your reporter or anchor's back. We had an incident. It wasn't with protests, but there was this creepy man just walking back and forth, and it was a female reporter out by herself. So, like, hey, I'm going to have to put you in the next block. Go find somewhere else to go. So we also, as producers, you know, they could be doing a live shot. They can't see what's going on behind them. So watch and make sure they're okay too, to have their back, especially with NABJs now. Not everyone has a photographer. So yeah, just from a producer standpoint, if it's not happening in your area, try to look through the wires and see where it's happening somewhere else, because there's always a protest going on, and make sure that you have your reporters back when they have live shots, and make sure that they're safe. You can always float a story or move a story, because you do not want that on air. You do not want anyone to be hurt.
A big part of these protests too, and just the Black Lives Matter movement, has been on social media, which is a great thing, getting like the news out there and stuff like that. But how did you guys represent your company and your own opinions on social media? Did you guys post your opinions? Did you guys just strictly do facts and stories that you guys were covering?
I guess I'll go. I post my opinion. I think that the issue you kind of run into, and that I think, you know, some managers might have issue with, is when things get political. I think the problem is some things have been made political that really aren't, whether that's science, whether that's as in wearing a mask, whether that is simply racist. I don't think that's political. That's just called being anti-racist, which is not a bad thing at all. So I think that's where you just, if you're going to post your opinion, you I guess you want to be along those lines. I try not to get political or things as I perceive as political. I've had plenty of conversations with, you know, management at times about just where the line is, and also using your stories at the same time, and using that to, I guess, cover the movement or you know, somewhat as your opinion. But I think the more conversation you have with management, the more conversation you have with people in general, I think you start to get a better feel for how to address those things in terms of a social media standpoint.
I think if you follow me on Twitter, you know I'm very vocal. However, vocal in a sense to where I'm not, to me, so it seems, jeopardizing any of my credibility, because at the end of the day, I'm Black before anything else. I will always be Black. I will never not be Black. And these issues affect me, my dad, my boyfriend, my cousins, my mom, everybody in my family. And so when I post certain things about what's happening, a lot of times the way that I'll word it to start a conversation is, well, what do you think about this? And that's not me posting my opinion, but it's me sharing something and trying to start a conversation, because that's what we keep pushing, is we need to have these conversations. I don't reply to everybody, but certain situations, like the other day I posted, it's Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. We need to do X, Y, and Z. Someone responded and said, this is racially dividing. Why would you single out? That's the problem. Why isn't it just Mental Health Awareness Month? I said, well, there is. It's in May. There is a Mental Health Awareness Month. So a lot of times I'll post these things and I'll ask, what do you think? And I'll let my other followers handle certain negative responses or whatnot, but I definitely do not engage in any trolls. I don't, someone called me a race baiter once for asking, what do you think about Drew Brees' apology? And I wrote her back and I said, how am I race baiting when I asked, what do you think? I asked, what do you think about the flies or the bugs or the mosquitoes in New Orleans versus, it's just me asking what you think. So that's probably the most challenging part about all of this, is finding a good balance between still being Black, being active on social media, yet not being too personal with it, even though it is personal to us. So I do a lot of typing and deleting, type, read out loud, delete again, type one more time, look over it, copy and paste, delete, post. Seriously, that's what I go through.
Yeah, I have a lot of tweets that just sit in my draft because I say, you know what, that it doesn't need to be out in the world. So sometimes I try to just post a story and then a statement or a fact from the story itself and just let it be. And then whenever I have anything more, that's when I just call my parents or my friends, and then I leave it that way, because there are those trolls that do come out and they want to pitch a fight. And sometimes it's easier, just for me at least, just to say, I don't even want to get into that conversation. So I'm just not even going to start one there.
So you all know I am very vocal, especially on my Facebook, which is private, but nothing is ever private on social media. So I am still, careful about what I post. One thing I've done lately when talking about these issues is trying to tie it to a personal experience. I mean, I'm Black, it's sad, but you can't demise my personal experience because that actually happened. And then also, if I feel some way about a story or something, I'll just retweet it or repost it to try to get it out there. But I just try to tie it into how this relates to me. How does this relate to a family member? Or, hey, this happened to this person. So it won't be like I'm picking sides. You can't judge something that actually happened. And then, I would say, like, for students, just really be careful what you post. A good example that someone mentioned was venting out to your friends and family. I've been doing that a lot because, it's kind of crazy. Literally, the end of my second week ever working in my first producing full-time job, all these protests happened. I'm the only Black producer at my station. It was just a weird time for me. So I was kind of silent, but not really, because I was talking to others. So, have your drafts with your tweets, type and delete. If you feel uncomfortable, just grab somebody and talk to them, and that release will hopefully help you out. And then also, of course, talk to your news director, assistant news director, talk to your managers and ask them, hey, what is your social media policy? If you are unsure, that's something I had to do because I was new, and race is it's a big topic. I mean, it's a big topic everywhere, but especially here in Georgia, we're really close to the Ahmaud Arbery case. So I was like, hey, what do we do in this situation? So it's always okay to ask questions. Because that's coming from the manager, and you can say, well, you told me. So yeah.
And we know journalism and news is constantly happening, and with the coronavirus and kind of leading straight into the Black Lives Matter movement, you guys been going nonstop for a long time. How have you guys worked on the mental health side of things? How did you guys decompress when you got home after a long day working?
Sorry, I'm just going to jump into this because my mental health is so important. I'm okay. I'm fine. I've talked about this on Facebook too, but I really went through a lot because I moved to Georgia by myself due to the pandemic. Then I started my station. I'm the only Black person working there, and all this Black Lives Matter stuff is happening. What I did was I found a therapist, And I started going to therapy, and, you know, if you look at your like plan, maybe they have resources for you to help you out, or reach out to your managers. I know that Gray TV, I worked for Gray TV. They had some type of program or something to help out people with their mental health. I don't remember what it is because I'm still using my mom's insurance. So like, yeah, reach out to your manager, say, hey, is there anything in my insurance that can help me out to find therapy or to go do something else? Also, maybe look up like yoga, do some meditation, call people, and also reach out to your associations. Thanks to Christina and Wilson, I am a member of National Association of Black Journalists, as you all know, and I just reach out to my fellow friends from the association. I'm like, hey, how are you all handling this at your station? Or hey, I need to vent because I feel some way about this. Or also, you can say, hey, I don't think I'm being supported at my station. What should I do? I need some help.
Yeah, NABJ continues to be a godsend in situations like this. I have several close colleagues in other markets. We have group chats, we've got text threads, group me, Twitter group DMs. I mean, all sorts of areas, trusted, confident areas where we vent. We say what we need to say. We talk about things that are going on in our newsroom and different things that how can we handle it? If in certain instances I want to get a little bit more personal, thankfully, you know, I will just pray, or I'll talk to my mom, my dad, I vent to my boyfriend, and then I'm good. But a lot of times for me dealing with all of this, I'll admit in the beginning it was very hard. It was very hard because I personally avoided watching the extended version of George Floyd dying. I waited and I avoided it until I was at home watching the news and they did a special and I had to sit there and watch it. And I bawled my eyes out. And after that, I was like, I can't watch this anymore. I just had to turn off the TV. So it's, at a certain point as journalists, it's okay to turn it off. Mm. It's okay. In fact, it's necessary. That is crucial. Turn it off. Find something else that is going to channel your thoughts somewhere else, even if it's just for 30 minutes. Like Sky said, meditating, yoga, going for a walk, a 30-second dance party, whatever you need to do it. Clear your head, because if you aren't right in a mental space, you don't want to bottle it up and then you have a breakdown. I've seen it happen to a lot of people in this business, and it can be really, really scary. So for me in the beginning, it was a lot. It was emotionally draining. It was exhausting to read and watch and report on all of these things between COVID and between racism and police brutality. But then after a while, I had to sit back, take a deep breath, and just turn stuff off. After a certain point in time, just turn it off. And that helps me.
Yeah, I've kind of taken that approach with sports at times, like as doing sports all day, and you consume so much information that sometimes I'll come home and I want nothing to do with it. And I think as journalists and with everything going on right now, like I personally am like addicted to Twitter sometimes, and that at some point too has even gotten just to be too much. So I found absolutely turning it off has helped me decompress a little bit. Maybe finding something else to kind of focus on. I've tried to get into photography a little bit more, and just maybe use that as just something to, I find if I don't put my mind towards something, then I'll probably open up the Twitter app and then I'm right back in it. And then I'm right back to having a conversation with somebody, whether it's a friend covering in another market, whether it's my fiance. Before you know it, I went from dealing with it at work to having another like 3-hour conversation with it at home. And then, you kind of don't get that relief of the stress, and you always feel like you're on the clock because you're constantly consuming the information and thinking, how am I going to cover this when this comes to me? What would I do in the situation, et cetera? So I've gone to City Park a lot and just kind of hung out with some friends, maybe had a beer or something with them out there, socially distant. One day, honestly, I went and sat in the median, like in front of my house, and just kind of waved at people going by and hung out and just totally decompressed away from technology. It felt great. It was one of the best 3 hours I had. So I would say just finding a way to unplug, like Christina said.
People watching is great. I do that often when I'm my work from home weeks. I'll go outside on my front porch and I just look and I'll be like, oh, that's crazy. Or I watch Christmas movies. That helps me too.
There was one week, it was the week the Ahmaud Arbery video came out. And then a few days prior, there was that incident in New York where the woman called the police on the guy for telling her to leash her dog. That week, I think something else happened that week, and I was just done. I was mentally and physically drained. So that Friday, I called out. I was like, hey, I can't come in today. I just can't. I deleted all the social media apps on my phone, and I tried my best to just stay away from it. Because like Chris said, I was just mentally exhausted from seeing it, keeping up with the news, trying to see all the stories. So I think it's important more than ever than for this industry we are in to know when to step away. And you have these sick days, use the sick days, use the time off days. It's there for you for a reason. And that took learning from me to do. My first market, I didn't want to take a sick day because I didn't want them to think, oh, he's playing hooky, that he's not really sick. But if you don't use the days, you're going to lose it. So I use it consciously, like, hey, I need a break. I'm going to tell you maybe, hey, I'm taking a mental health day. Or I don't legally need to tell you why I'm taking the day, but I think it's so important to know when you need a system reset.
And I co-signed what Real One said. I think at least all of us at some point have taken a day throughout this. I have. The day before, I straight up texted my boss. I said, hey, I need a day. And she was like, okay. And it's a blessing to have managers who understand our mental health is so crucial. And that's something when you graduate and you go on your jobs and you interview for these things, ask your managers, how do you support our mental health? What are some things that you encourage for our mental health? Because you will need those days. And use those sick days, like Roland said, same thing. I didn't use mine my first job. Second job, I never wanted to take off. Even when I got here in New Orleans, I was still hesitant because you're trying to build your credibility. But you don't want to get to the point to where you have a breakdown. And so if you feel even close to the edge, even if you're just there, call in, send a text. And like, you don't legally have to, like Rowan said, but out of the courtesy, let your manager know, I'm overwhelmed. May I have a day? And most times, they're going to say yes.
Sadly, I couldn't take a day off because I just started. I just built up enough PTO to get one day off. But with from the producing side of things, I would say one thing to help me out, like I did, it's so interesting to say that, Christine, like I couldn't watch, I physically got sick at work when I saw the parts of the George Floyd video. And then, we've been doing Ahmaud Arbery a lot, and it was a lot. And so as a producer, even as a reporter, if you're tying in a national story to your local story, you don't have to add the video. You can maybe just say something, or maybe just do a still. Or one thing that helped me out in my shows was balancing out the stories. Try to find some good stories, some happy, like, stories about Black people. I don't know, a little boy with a lemonade stand or something, just to show a little bit of hope. To make you a little bit happy for your people, because these stories really can break you down, seeing how us Black Americans are being treated. So that would be my suggestion. And then, you have the power of course, talk to your producer. Everyone's different, but you have the power of controlling what is and is not in your show as a producer. And if you have 4 killings back to back, and it's just too much, then, maybe ask someone to put in another show, because many of the time these shows run back to back for 3 hours. So you don't have to repeat the same content every single hour. So be like, hey, you want to take this story, I'm going to throw in this story, so that you don't have to see it so much and rewrite it over and over again.
And we have an NABJ question in the chat. How has/will the direction of NABJ be/been different with the coronavirus epidemic and police shootings?
I would say, at least with the pandemic, obviously the biggest loss was our conference. That was really sad, but NABJ continues to have programs online virtually, like right now, and they have like meetings, Zoom meetings, and different programs, virtual programs, which have been very helpful. They also have been releasing statements on how reporters and anchors and producers have been, and writers, print too, have been treated at different stations. So yeah, they've just been, I would recommend following them on Twitter and Facebook. They always respond to things. If you feel like they should respond to something, let them know, and most of the time they will. But they've just been like showing support and providing lots of resources, as Professor Collins put in the group chat, and having lots of meetings. And
yeah, NABJ has been incredibly supportive throughout all of this. We did miss our family reunion, which I'm still not over, but we'll be fine. But it's been nice to have an organization and a president like Dorothy Tucker who is there instantly through and through when something isn't right, when something isn't okay. Even speaking from a coronavirus perspective, she was diagnosed with COVID-19 and was public about it and spoke about it and put it into a personal perspective. I mean, NABJ has really used these trying and difficult times to support its journalists, to make sure that we support one another, and to just be open and honest about what's wrong, not because it's political, but because it's just wrong, versus what's right because it's just right. So I'm honored, forever and eternally grateful for NABJ and its continued support.
I know if you look on NABJ's website and ONA's, they both have a good amount of resources, different webinars happening too, that talk about different, from mental health like we talked about earlier, to covering protests and stuff like that. So anyone can go to their website and check out the resources they have. Most of them are free. I'm pretty sure all of them are free, but don't quote me on that. So now I want to move into the name of this event. What is an ally to you guys?
If I may, because I just had a situation like this in my newsroom. An ally to me, and I'm going to name drop her because she deserves it, Jennifer Crockett has been an incredible ally throughout all of this. My whole newsroom is, but Jen in particular, we had a situation, we were all in a meeting, and, the conversation just didn't sit well with me. And so we talked afterward in private, and I told her what I felt, and she asked me, well, one, she listened, which is a great characteristic of an ally. She listened, and then she asked, well, what could I have said that you didn't hear in this conversation? And I gave her suggestions, and that took her back to another situation where we handled it differently because it was a different race. And she was like, wow, Christina, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. And she was like, I didn't even think about that until you brought it up to me. And Jen has completely she's asked me questions, things like, well, what can I do? How can I help? What can I say? How can I help you? Or different things that I need to say in order to support you in these meetings when you're pitching these stories, because I'm the only Black on-air person during our dayside meetings. It's just me. And a lot of times I'm the only one pitching these stories. I'm the only times pitching, finding different ways to move these stories forward and not just focus on protests, but to focus on the conversations. Like, that's been my biggest struggle throughout all of this. How can I move the story forward? Because our viewers, sometimes they don't want to see protests. They always say, oh, why are you protesting? And there's COVID. That's the main thing that I'm hearing. So I've found a way to do things with the Urban League, do things with other organizations, and finding people to move the conversation forward. And it's nice to have someone like Jennifer Crockett who will also try and dig for these stories too, to be that ally, to make sure these stories get told. And that is, I mean, shout out to her for just being so open-minded with it and really wanting to learn and stand in solidarity with us.
Christina said an important thing, I think, there about, especially in the morning meetings or editorial meetings, pitching stories. I think a good ally is especially someone that will say, oh, I like this story, and here's why I think we need to do it. Because I'll pitch the same story over and over again until I get a reason why we aren't covering it. If not, if no one tells me explicitly, it's going to be a pitch I bring up again tomorrow. So what allies in our newsroom I hear often do, they'll say, oh, Roman said this story the other day, so here's what I think would add to that story he already pitched, X, Y, and Z. So I think just reinforcing conversations or advancing stories where it warrants it.
I would say, too, an ally is someone who's going to step forward with you. Race obviously isn't the most comfortable conversation for everyone. Even as someone who's Black, like I can't say that I've spent a ton of time like openly trying to engage a lot of people in the conversation of race as I have over the last, couple months, and just trying conversations has been my thing. And so I think when it comes to talking about that, having someone who is willing to step out alongside you and have these conversations and within our sports office, Juan Kincaid has been great. Like me and him have had a lot of conversations on our podcast and whatnot about race and how its effect on sports, which I think is important. I've seen a lot of sports writers. I've seen several within New Orleans that have written some really cool things, that have used their voice on social media. From a personal perspective within sports, the majority of the athletes we cover here, football and basketball, it's a lot of African Americans, it's a lot of Black athletes. And I think my personal opinion, and I put it out there, really at the beginning of all of this, was that if we are using their accomplishments, their stats, their great plays, and we are benefiting from writing about it, highlights of it, etc., but we're not, I guess, at least sharing or showing what they are trying to gain with this movement, or the movement that they're trying to push forward as well, then we're essentially saying that we only care about them for what they do and not who they are. And I had the revelation really just a couple days ago. There are a lot of times, I would say, for a personal example, Demario Davis with the Saints has been really active in, I believe, prison reform. He has been very active socially with a lot of issues that face America, not just recently, but for years. And there are times where we may go to training camp and we may be focused on what the linebacker room is doing, how they're performing, how Drew Brees is performing, what Alvin Kamara's up to, who's injured. To these guys, they may bring up an issue, and it just may not fit your sports agenda for that day. And a lot of that happens, but I think it's important that you listen to it, and then maybe find the time, even if it doesn't fit your agenda, put it in a web story. Don't let that go ignored. Let your audience know that these are more than just athletes, that they're people, and that they have something to say that we could all probably listen to. And I think that's just kind of personally spoke to me. And I think as an ally is someone who would help step up and share that and help push that forward.
I would say for going off of like telling stories and agendas and things like that, some of you may be in a smaller market, so excuse me, these stories might not apply too much to your DMA. And my advice would be, if you see a story and you feel like, it's really serious and you should share it, try to find a local angle. An example would be with the military bases changing the names of like Confederate bases. Look to see if there are any in your state that applies to. Try to do that local angle, so it's not just like, oh, you're just trying to tell a random story. And then also with pitching stories, if you get an email and you see that's not in your agenda or day book, for those who don't know, like that's something where that's kind of like a planner that you use to put out all the stories that are going on in your area, so that reporters can find something to report on or producers can find something to write on. Send the email out to Newsroom again. Be like, hey, just throwing this back out here. This might be interesting. Or if you see something popping off on social media and there's no press releases about it, copy those, copy the link to those tweets, copy the links to those Facebook posts, screenshot those and put them in your email and throw them in that email and say, hey, we should look into this, or hey, something, this might be happening. I know that happened. Well, a couple of cases we might notice with Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, they're being told weeks, almost months later than when they actually happen. And so, and sometimes it happens because government officials just don't want to respond. But just, keep pushing things out there and hopefully someone will pick it up. And then I was just throwing that in with telling stories, because I know being fresh out of college, a lot of us might be in small markets. Hope y'all make it big though. And in terms of being an ally, it's kind of weird for me because it's literally just me and one other producer who works for 6 hours straight overnight. And, she's white, but she's been really great with listening and asking questions. For example, the other day she was like, why are people upset why are people trying to knock down an emancipation statue? And I was like, well, the statue shows a slave kneeling at a white man's feet, so, just try to explain and ask questions. Be careful with how you ask your questions, so you don't sound a little, just be careful with how you ask your questions, but, just reach out. It's better to ask or try to figure something out besides just doing it and getting heat for it.
To kind of piggyback on that, I actually think, we as Black journalists have to also be mindful that sometimes our white colleagues may not know how to ask, and that's okay. We have to be understanding of that as well, and not necessarily take personal offense to the way something is asked, but be grateful that it's being asked in general, because there have been situations here where someone has asked me, hey, Christina, is this okay? And I'll come over and I'll read it. Or, between our sports guys, our web department, our producers, they've all asked me certain questions like, is it okay if I say this? And if I say no, they're like, well, why not? Or even something as simple as our all-knowing chief meteorologist Margaret Orr asking, can I say crunk on TV? I'm like, no, ma'am. You cannot. I was like, please do not say that. You're going to look like you're trying too hard, all due respect. But asking, and it's okay to do that. And we as Black journalists have to be mindful that sometimes the question may not come across as, in a way that it should, I guess you could say. But, the fact that someone is asking, to me, means all the world. The fact that someone asked me, when the Saints put out their video about, racial injustice and whatnot, and they asked me, hey, can you look at this web script, make sure that this is worded properly, is this okay? And I'm like, yeah, here's what I would change and here's why. And that's part of being such a strong ally in the newsroom, because the content that we put out is so important on every single platform and every single department, from the highest of the highest to, from even what we edit, how we are editing these pieces that make air. Because sometimes all viewers will watch the TV on mute and all they see is the video. So having allies in the newsroom who can say, hey, can you look over this video for me? Can you read over the script for me next month? All of that is just so crucial.
Yeah, I would just like to add, asking questions. Even myself, I'm known in my newsroom as a person who asks so many questions, because you want to make sure you don't want to get in trouble for anything. In reviewing scripts at our station, it's not a rule, but we have this thing where if you are posting anything on the web, if you have any racial stories, that it needs to be approved by a manager, because we are kind of a starter market. So, some people don't really know how to say things. Even I don't. And so that's a good way to get help when telling those stories. And then again, just keep on asking your questions. Oh, dang, I had a really good point. I just forgot. I'm really sad. Oh, well, it's okay. Yeah, okay, that's what I was gonna say. And then this is the time, especially for Black journalists, this is really the time for us to speak up. If you're quiet in the back and you feel like something's wrong or something's not right, say something. And not just for all journalists too. You may have never covered a race story before. This is your chance to learn and to reach out and to ask questions and help, yourself look better, because we might have this big protest surge in 2 years from now, and so you have experience from doing it before. So just keep on asking questions. And again, I side with Christina too. Lots of people in your newsroom may not have been in environments with Black people. They may not know how to ask questions at all. And right, you can't take offense. Well, personally, I think you shouldn't take offense. You should be like, okay, it's good they ask the questions before making a station look dumb on air. And just keep on asking. Even when it comes to names, even if it's not protest or social justice, if there's a name from something that happened and you don't know how to pronounce it, Google it, or look it up, or maybe ask a question so it doesn't seem like you don't know what you're doing, or you didn't even do research or try. You just read the script. Always read over your scripts. Always ask questions, especially as a producer. If there's a name in there, I know we've had a couple Africans names I had to learn how to say and spell out for my anchors so that they don't mess it up on air. So yeah, just research, ask your questions, and just take this as a learning experience. It could be personally and professionally.
I saw a question in the chat in response to, I believe, what Jen asked me, what can she say during a meeting? And basically, I'm trying to describe the situation discreetly, but there was a video of what was relayed to us as a crime. Though it wasn't confirmed it was a crime, there isn't a crime being committed in the video. It was just two Black young men, I say young men because I don't know how old they were, with guns walking. And the conversation was, oh, why are these kids with big guns breaking into cars? And we assumed. And I was like, we can't assume that. We can't just say because they're two Black people with guns that they are committing a crime. I said, you can have guns. You are allowed to have guns. Let's, we forget Second Amendment rights sometimes when it comes to Black people. We forget that that is allowed. And so when Jen reached out to me about it, she was like, well, what can I say? I said, well, Jen, you could have said, well, let's not assume that this is a crime. Let's reach out to NOPD. Let's reach out to the person who sent us this video. And then if it's not anything, we'll take it from there. And I was like, but everyone at that time was so stuck on the fact, oh, look at these guns. What are they doing? The neighbor said X, Y, and Z. And so Jen realized at that point, we have to be mindful that just because you see in this particular situation a Black person with a gun doesn't automatically assume that they are doing anything wrong, because that is their Second Amendment right.
I'm glad you guys mentioned having a conversation, because I think that's the hardest part for people in a newsroom, is just being okay with asking questions. So I really appreciate that. You guys talked about what allies can do in the newsroom. What can they do on social media, or in the field, or maybe while you guys aren't together in a newsroom?
My suggestion would be to join or follow all of these associations. Just because I'm Black, I don't only follow the National Association of Black Journalists. There's Asian American, Native American, Hispanic. They just came out with a trans one. Yes. And so just follow all of them. And that will really help you expand your resources, at least from a journalist point of view. Then also in your market, look at the Urban League, look at the local NAACP chapter, look at those other chapters, follow them on social media, and because that can also help you out find stories too. Subscribe to their emails to help you, learn more about how you could be an ally, not just in the newsroom, but outside of the newsroom. And then also another thing that I have found really helpful is just reaching out to your colleagues. I've had people from my old station, people from my current station, and even people who don't even work with me, just reach out and be like, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Because you don't know, they could be suffering alone. With space, don't be creepy about it. You can get off your own judgment, but if you're really close to someone and you see they may be struggling, maybe reach out and be like, hey, how are you doing? Because some people really don't know how to deal with these issues, and they may really need somebody to talk to. But you know, feel the vibes. Don't go out contacting every Black reporter you know.
I think being an ally outside of the newsroom, shout out to one of our morning producers. I'm name dropping here because they deserve it. Kate. She, ever since all of this has happened, she has taken pretty much her social media in her Instagram account, and every story has been about things that she's learning, things that she's watching. She's watched every single documentary that I've recommended to her, including Ava DuVernay's 13th on Netflix. She's watched When They See Us. She's reading books. She's trying to learn, trying to educate herself. And this is a white girl from Annapolis, Maryland, who, you know, prior to this, like, she always had a little soul in her. But I think for her to see and watch the injustice and the decades and years of racism that we've dealt with, it's really helped her grow. And it also helps with the content and helps her as a producer, and it helps her just grow as a human. And so being an ally outside of the newsroom is, I think that's crucial, to watch, to read, and to listen to these things.
Can I ask a question, Jill?
Yes.
I have a question about that, Christina, because I'm reading stuff this summer that's about like white privilege and how to be an anti-racist and things like that. And like you mentioned your coworker, and she's posting that stuff on social media. Like, I don't want to be performative about it, but I also want people to know that, like, I'm a white person and I'm self-educating, and it's okay to do that. Like, I guess what I'm wondering is, when is that appropriate and when is it offensive or self-serving?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, if you're active on social media and you normally post things, if once you want to post like, hey y'all, I just read this book, I recommend it, that sort of thing, I think it's fine. But in reality, even people can post things on social media and it mean absolutely nothing. It's the conversations that you have with those closest to you, those around you. So if you watch something, or if you read something and you want to be like, oh my gosh, this book was so great, cool, that's fine to me. I don't take offense to it, because to me it's like, I don't know what you're doing outside of social media anyway, but I'm happy to see that you're acknowledging it. And I think we have to stop being so quick to judge and so quick to be like, oh, are they even actually doing anything? Oh, this is all for show. This is an era of social media, period. What people do is going to end up on social. And I think that we have to be understanding that if it's up there, we have to take it as such that someone is genuinely trying to learn. And if not, that's on them. But we can be supportive and say, like I tell my producer, whenever she posts something, I'll ask her, hey, what did you learn? And we'll talk about it. Or I'll just simply tell her, you know what, thank you so much. I'm like, I know I tell you this all the time, but thank you. So I don't think it's self-serving per se, because I mean, it's social media. We're on social. If you want to share it with your followers, please do. I mean, I think that's important.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question for Sky. Have you noticed any significant differences in how media diversity and inclusion is taught in school versus how it is practiced in the newsroom?
Okay, so yeah, that's an interesting question, because I actually did have a conversation with some professors over the past couple of weeks about this, and I'm very excited that there are going to be some changes to Loyola's community. I've noticed that when I was at school, I really only had these conversations, journalism, like media related based, twice. Once in my first class, Intro to Mass Comm, and then again when I was, we had to take, I can't think of the name of the class, but it's a diversity class with Gina Swanson. And then of course some teachers were really good about it, because we do have guidelines to follow at Loyola to make sure we pass our class, but like one class isn't enough. Some professors, Professor Collins is one, and have done a really great job of putting it in all of their classes and reassuring and making sure that it's being spoken more than once in a semester. they've been doing good about making sure that it's happening more than once a semester. But then also I feel like as students, make sure that you all continue the conversation outside of the classroom. Don't look at it as just a lecture or just trying to get a grade. Really just take it as a learning aspect, because this is something that will carry on for you forever. Like experience I had at Loyola, being one of a few Black journalists, I'm carrying over with me now at my first job. And so it's kind of the same at my first job. We don't talk about it too much, but that's also because we're working all day. But I believe my general manager, Larry, has been doing a great job with making us have Zoom meetings about diversity discussions, sort of kind of like what we're having right now, with them bringing in professionals from outside the newsroom, so it doesn't seem too biased, similar to how we do in class, having professors and things like that. So yeah, I would just say just bring in experts to help you have conversations, and just continuing the conversation outside of that one meeting or outside of that one class. So that's kind of been the similarity that's been going on, just having conversations. And I think the one thing that we lack is continuing the conversations. I hope that makes sense. I was really all over the place. I'm sorry, y'all.
No, that was good. We'll open the last 5 minutes up for any questions you guys have. I know, Caroline, you raised your hand, so you can go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not going to speak from personal experience, but I know, like, especially when this first started, and even in 2017 with Colin Kaepernick, a lot of people struggled with, like, feeling silenced and feeling like they weren't allowed to say what was actually on their mind or what was actually going on because of, like, the corporate culture, right? And a lot of that is definitely being called out right now. But I know a lot of my friends have talked about it, and just that overwhelming feeling of, okay, I want to say something, I feel the need to say something, and there should be something said, but I don't necessarily feel comfortable or like it is my place to say something. So how have y'all dealt with that, I guess?
I would say hopefully this is as comfortable as it gets for anyone to speak out about this stuff, because I think we've probably all been in situations where there's strength in numbers, like you feel a little bit more comfortable doing something if everyone else is. I mean, in 2016 or 2017, if you felt a type of way about, let's say you sided with, maybe not sided with, but just agreed with what Colin Kaepernick was trying to say, or maybe if you sided with it, maybe if you, wanted to go down the path of that conversation but didn't feel comfortable doing it because there was such backlash. I mean, we were doing stories about local businesses who said they weren't going to show Saints games anymore after they knelt at the game in Carolina in 2017. But now I think there has been enough of a push. I know whichever Tuesday that Blackout Tuesday was there were a lot of black squares, but I think the next step is to have the conversation about it. And so it's obvious on everyone's mind. I think it's unavoidable when you get on social media. It certainly was a couple weeks ago, and I hope we continue to make it a regular talking point, but it should be an easier talking point, I think, at least because we're having the conversation a lot more. A lot more people are willing to have the conversation, or at least aware of it, aware and acknowledging the problem. And so hopefully that helps now. I think it's helped me a little bit. And I think in terms of being an ally, don't run from the conversation. Don't run from it being uncomfortable, because sometimes that can be mistaken for not caring, whether you do or don't care. But I think don't be afraid to engage in the conversation, because I think it'll help everybody. I've had people reach out to me. I post a lot of stuff on Instagram when I finally had like a day off to kind of process George Floyd's murder, and I had a lot of people to me and want to start a conversation, whether they realized racism or whether they didn't realize racism was still an issue because that's the world they lived in, whether they had it on their mind and finally, felt comfortable talking about it. I think there's a lot more numbers, and hopefully it makes it a little bit easier, but you just got to have the courage and be the ally to step out and have that conversation if it's something you care about.
I'd also add, if I may, just being comfortable being uncomfortable. And these uncomfortable conversations, they're not easy. I mean, it's 2020 and we're still talking about racism. We're still talking about us going out into the world, no matter our profession, no matter our education, but being looked at by some simply because we're Black. And so to handle these conversations, and sometimes I have been weary about saying something, and I wonder about how some of our viewers who, truth be told, sometimes I think they forget that I'm Black because of the way that I speak. True story. Until Black issues come up. And then someone, told me, be careful, Christina, remember you're a journalist. And I was like, but I'm Black, ... So for me, it's a matter of, I guess, just everyone in general understanding that this is uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be uncomfortable if we address it now, if we talk about it, and if we do speak up and have these conversations, and also realize that everybody won't be willing to listen. But if you can get one more person to listen, that's one more person who understands the things that are going on, and then they can share it and pass it along.